Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Modern Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Tasha Anderson, and I am very excited to have this conversation. You all know, based on previous episodes, that I like to geek out on all things operational and how to make lives for those leading nonprofit organizations much, much easier. So I brought along my new friend, Mitch Stein. Mitch has a really fascinating background, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit. But you are the founder of joinpond.com, or more simply put, Pond. And I want to talk a little bit more about this. But I think you, like me, started in maybe what would have been a pretty lucrative, prestigious career, right? You graduated summa cum laude, you went to business school, you ended up at Goldman Sachs. Like, you could have created any path for yourself, Mitch, probably. I went into working in public accounting, could have picked with any industry. But I think our personal lives, I'm probably paraphrasing, I'm putting words in your mouth, but our personal lives and our professional lives started to kind of maybe hit a crossroads or like intertwine. And then there was this idea, is there a way that I can take what I've learned in business about business and apply that to the nonprofit sector? And you meet some really cool people along the way. So Mitch, I'm excited to chat with you a little bit more about your story and hear a little bit more about that. But first, I want to say thank you for joining us, first and foremost, and looking forward to this talk.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to jumping in, as we like to say at Pond.
Yes, no pun intended, right?
Very much intended.
So tell me, Mitch, right out of the gate, how does a former VP from Goldman Sachs end up in the impact sector, working with nonprofit organizations and other mission-based business leaders?
Yeah, so it's always been a real core part of me. Growing up, I was running bake sales for nonprofits, or like selling Krispy Kreme donuts in the cafeteria for tsunami relief, and did a big like leukemia and lymphoma fundraiser for one of my mom's friends had leukemia, and we were selling bandanas that she would wear when she was going through chemo. So I always, just from a young age, that was like a part of me and what I like to do. And I think as I started my professional career, initially I was so busy that I didn't feel like I had capacity to really do much outside of work. And I think that's a trap a lot of young people fall into, where the perception is like, oh, well, once I'm successful, then I become a philanthropist, in my 60s. And there's sort of this gap in understanding of like where you can really give back and participate. And in 2016, one of my colleagues, a guy named Johan Schudlik, who I'll come back to in a second, was a mentor of mine, and he was on the board of an organization called the LGBT Center here in New York City. And they have an event every summer called Cycle for the Cause. And it's the Northeast AIDS ride, a bike ride from Boston to New York. And Johan knew that we had lost my uncle to AIDS. And so my dad and I signed up for that event together to ride together. And we didn't really have any expectations. And it just turned into this like massive passion project for me and my family. Now we've raised over $400,000 for the organization over the past several rides. And it just like lit a spark in me that I never really felt before. And not only, obviously it's great maybe there's a little bit of guilt that I had been toiling away at a big bank, and it felt nice to get my and other people's money like moving in the right direction and helping other people. But really just the education too, because so many people had no idea, the extent of the AIDS epidemic, even up till now, and in certain communities where it's, and there's been a lot of progress in the past few years, but especially in 2016, it was still very real and very dangerous. And so that like education component and really educating people and talking about something that had a lot of stigma historically, I also think was just really exciting to me to bring that into like the workplace in particular. So I'd spent a lot of time grappling with like what that means for me and how I could, should I go be a development director? What's like the right thing for me to do? And I ultimately just felt like if there were a way for me to impact a large number of organizations versus just going to work for just one, especially with my background in working in markets and marketplaces, I wonder if there's something I could do. And I think that's what really got me down this road. It's been a long, winding one, but starting to think about, is there something more entrepreneurial and tech oriented I covered the technology space as a banker, so I'm definitely not a technologist, but I was just really familiar with a lot of these successful internet and software businesses, especially online marketplaces. And that's a lot of what inspired me to get started with Pond.
I love that. So tech, you talked about, is a big part certainly of Pond. I mean, it is an online platform, it's an online marketplace. I think a lot of people are concerned or reluctant or hesitant to embrace technology within the nonprofit space. And some might even question, what does a tech company have to do with nonprofits? We can't use it, we don't have the skill set, we don't have the budget, whatever it is, whatever people think, there's a stigma associated with that, or some sort of these things don't mix together, or whatever. What would you say tech has to do with the nonprofits in your experience, not just working with them through Goldman Sachs and tech companies that are also working with nonprofits, but now in your position, how do you see those two worlds intersect?
Yeah, and part of really what inspired me to get started was with the organization I worked for, they were transitioning to a new fundraising platform. And they just had a really bad experience with their old one. And then the search process that they went through was also, kind of a nightmare. And I just heard about this secondhand and I was like, that is crazy. There's no way that exists. There has to be an easier way to go shopping for stuff for your nonprofit. I think about all the things in my life. If I want a car or a home or to book a trip, like how easy that is. And there's literally nothing for a nonprofit. And you talk to different people of what did you do the last time you needed to find a new tool or hire a consultant? It's like always, I don't know, I called some friends, I posted on Facebook, I got a lot of helpful or unhelpful comments. I Googled around on the internet for a while and everything seemed like an ad. I didn't know what to trust. And then I just got bombarded by salespeople. And so I think a lot of it isn't so much that people are like I think a lot of times when we describe nonprofits as being like averse to tech, or I think it has a lot more to do with just time limitations and really trust, because so many of these companies get in their own way of like, they've been instructed in their sales manuals that they send 45,000 outreaches, to every method possible. And this is just an audience that doesn't have time for that. And they're also really relational. And so the more that you approach them as like a bot, sending them emails constantly or constant messages, it doesn't work. And it actually drives a wedge further, not just between your company and the potential customer, but truly, I believe, like between the sector and between the sector and technology. And so for me, that's where I covered a lot of these marketplace businesses. And I was like, okay, this is high volume. Like nonprofits, it's a big segment. It's super fragmented, which means it inevitably is kind of disorganized in how people procure and make decisions on outside vendors, technology, consultants, trainings, and everything in between, outsource CFOs, accountants, whatever it is. Like there's no like organized way to go about finding and selecting those providers. And so that was really the big vision for Pond, is like, how could this be the central store? Like, where could you go shopping? And so it went through a lot of different iterations, but I think what we learned most importantly is that nonprofits have severe limitations on their time, like you said, their bandwidth. They all have 25 different hats on. They generally are social workers, educators, teachers. Definitely, it's really rare that someone was like formally trained in software, for example, or a lot of other things that they're procuring. So it's really intimidating, and there's a bit of a knowledge gap. And people have limited budgets. I'm not saying, I think sometimes people cast a bad light on nonprofits that they're all like, don't have any money, which is definitely not true. But by and large, you have limited budgets, especially to spend on things that constitute overhead, which technology and systems always does. And then the last one is the trust that I mentioned. And so we took a deep look at, okay, this can't just be a normal marketplace. It can't just be like listings like Yelp, right? And with reviews, it's not actually helpful. It's not solving the real problems. And so that's why when someone comes to Pond today, it's a lot more like if you've ever used Angie's List or Thumbtack, like we guide you in, what are your problems, right? Like, let's just start with you. Let's meet you where you are. What do you need help with? Can you answer a couple questions? We're going to share this with our vendor audience. You can come back to Pond and check who's interested to talk to you. No one gets your email. It's all in your control. And you're actually going to get $100 for each conversation you have, all facilitated through Pond. It saves you a ton of time. And we provide references for people. We help them if they need to learn more about these product areas. We have webinars and tutorials and ways to talk to your board and like all the resources to just smooth out that whole process. So back to your question of like, what does a tech company have to do with nonprofits? Like everything I just mentioned is hastened by technology. And even though we're not like a deep tech business, you know, not like I'm inventing some crazy new technology. I think it is so cool to see how technology can be used to bring about a more human experience, which I don't think we normally think about. Like we actually are bringing people closer together at the right point in time. Like you're talking to the right person about the right thing that matters to you at the right time. And that's how you use technology to make those kinds of connections more human.
You said so many good points along the way. Relational, that is definitely something that I've noticed working in this market. You know, and I think that vendors, it's funny, I was talking with one of my team members the other day, and he has recently switched from being a service provider, so an accountant, to working more operationally with my firm. And he had said something through this experience. We're going through all these transitions on our HR stuff. So we're changing systems and working with new providers. And he said something that really rings true, that some providers look at it very transactional, robotic in nature, giving this super complex implementation to somebody that has no business managing that implementation on their own. And so for us, we are not HR experts, and yet we're given this bullet point list of all these super jargony technical things for which I don't know what they are. And it's like, okay, here, figure it out. And I think that that's one of the issues with the nonprofits is they don't have the time to research and figure this stuff out. They don't necessarily have the skill set within their organization to help figure this stuff out. It's really transactional, not super relational. And that was my response to my team member, was something to the effect of, in these moments, I think that's why I grow really frustrated with service providers, because I know what we do for our clients to try to take that heavy lifting off of the nonprofit that does not, that's why they're hiring us to help, right? And that builds the relational piece. And something else you said that I thought was interesting, businesses that want to work with the nonprofit sector, you mentioned that they're very, like, I'll use the word, I don't remember the exact word that you use, but I call them like little micro ecosystems, right? So you'll have either by region, or you'll have by mission, or you'll have by something else, right? So for example, homeless shelters, completely different operation than, you know, one of my web-based, social justice or advocacy lobby work type organizations, which is totally different than an arts museum, right? And so meeting people where they're at and understand their specific needs, because it's a massive market. And I think businesses that want to work in this space have to understand like the nuances between these different organizations. And I think sometimes we say like the nonprofit industry as if there's this big homogenous group of people that are nonprofits, when in reality, that's like saying the for-profit world is all the same, when in reality, a restaurant is much different than a car dealership and a barbershop. And I mean, vastly different. And to assume that they're all the same and treat them all in the same way through the sales approach or otherwise, that's one of the things I really liked. I noticed all the questions that you ask or that you offer information to to people looking for providers on your website will help curate their experience, I think, a little bit better. So I think that's really cool. So something else you said that I remember when I started this firm 6 years ago, I have lots of friends that you might expect that are accountants and they own accounting firms. None of them, by the way, work with nonprofits. You came from the financial background, working at a large bank, and it's no secret that people don't go into the nonprofit sector to get rich. I mean, this is not a get rich quick scheme by no means. And there's this idea, like you were saying, that nonprofits have no money. And oftentimes I got heard, especially in the beginning, Tasha, you can't build a business just working with nonprofits. They don't have the money. It's not sustainable. How are you going to actually grow your business? And I think that that's a myth, but I know my reasons for thinking that's a myth, Mitch, but I'm curious to hear, what do you think when people say things like that?
Yeah, and I mean, I hear that all the time. And as someone who's gone through, in the middle of some fundraising processes, like talking to investors, I mean, there is just a massive gap in understanding about what the sector is. I mean, any sector that employs over 20 million people, to say that it's like not a valuable place to be doing business, I just don't know how you get away with saying that. I mean, they're spending over $1 trillion a year. And I think a lot of people are focused on the limitations today, or some of the restrictions today on people, as opposed, and for us as a business in particular, I am not selling a individual product or service. In fact, we don't charge nonprofits a dime. We actually pay them to use Pond. We are building the infrastructure to connect people with the right solutions, because my fundamental belief is that will prove that there can be a real efficient distribution channel for companies serving the nonprofit sector, so that we can just shut this myth down once and for all. And that there will be much more investment in the companies that can provide real innovative services, custom tailored to the nonprofit sector, because there is a clear way to go to market and reach those customers. Because there's 2 million of them in the US alone, there's 10 million globally. Like I said, they're spending over $1 trillion a year. And I don't think any of us, anyone could say that $1 trillion couldn't be more efficiently spent, or better leverage, new tools and services to meet their mission. So I just don't have any patience for it anymore. Candidly, if someone asked me that question in an investor meeting, I'd probably politely end it early, because they're just not the right person for us to be working with. So, and that's the other thing too, is which I'm sure you've experienced this. It's kind of like, okay, that's fine. If you want to believe that, I don't need you, right? Like, you should be looking to me to give you knowledge about the sector, because I talk to these people day in, day out, for years now. And for you to come in and tell me that this isn't a worthwhile sector to be doing business, I think is preposterous. And not to mention, every single major technology company has a program trying to figure out how they can better serve nonprofits, every single one. And the truth is that none of them know how to do it still, none of them. And they are all, I was just on a call last week with a consortium of major technology companies based out of Silicon Valley. And they're like, we've been giving away coupons to our products, but it doesn't seem to really be having an impact. And you're like, yes, yeah, exactly. It's like 5% of the way there is just giving some, that's like a free puppy program, right? But like, what happens when the puppy leaves the lot, right? Like, someone has a new cost center, new thing they need to manage, when they've been handed this thing without any training, without having the right people on staff, or bandwidth to manage it, or budget to hire a consultant to do it. I mean,
there's just available consultants even available. I know some platforms like, oh, you have licenses, but really you have to build the whole thing, and there's no consultants available to do that. So
and this is why I don't think the answer in this market is philanthropy, because what that philanthropy is doing, so that's corporate philanthropy, right? Is I'm going to just allocate a certain amount of our product to give away for free or highly discounted. But that is number one, not actually having the impact you want it to. And number two, it's not helping to build a market, which is what the sector really needs. Is it needs a market and a marketplace where it is open to innovators, entrepreneurs, people like you and me that have a real passion for the space and bring unique knowledge and skills. And they just need to better be able to connect with the right customers for what they offer. And if we can cut out, some of the BS involved in the process of doing that, along with facilitating more capital investments in those businesses, I just think we are right on the cusp of an explosion in the productivity in the nonprofit sector.
Oh man, two things that you said there, if I can remember. I want to get on one before I forget, but it goes back to, I remember when I first started this business 6 years ago, everyone thought I was crazy. I quit my job as a CFO, very comfortable Not easy. Stressful for sure, but comfortable by way of I don't have to worry about job security, and I know I can stay here and I'm successful in this job, right?
Yeah.
And I started this firm, and after the initial, can I do this? Meaning, can I prove this concept that I could job share myself amongst a handful of nonprofit organizations? And can I serve these smaller organizations in a way that I served this larger organization? Can I get enough people to pay me while I try to do their work while I try to prove this concept, right? And then probably 6 months into it, after I was successful in finding a handful of clients that were willing to take a chance on me, I immediately shifted to the mindset of I'm almost afraid to see what happens when people find out more about the work we're able to do. And that was still probably true up until a year ago, until I've hired tons of people, and I'm still committed to hiring tons of people. Because going back to what we said, once you are a vetted resource, you've proven to have a successful model, you're actually a heavy lifting source of support for these organizations. They can truly delegate the function and the responsibility and the oversight of this one particular thing. Once you figure it out, the market is so huge, the need is so great, the talent out there is so few that you can't fail. And that's what I tell people. It's not like I'm Steve Jobs creating Apple and something crazy and innovative. I mean, this is definitely a service that's needed. And there's a lot of people that are looking for support. But you have to find the right mix of you have the right talent, you have the right skills and experience, you have the right connection with people and really understand their businesses and how they work, not just truly how their program works, but what their operational needs are. And once you kind of tap into all of that, they tell other people to tell other people because all the people leading these organizations work in smaller ecosystems that have connections with other organizations that are dealing with the same exact problem, which is exactly why Pond is so important. That's exactly why there's these large Facebook groups. Hey, does anybody know how to fix this? Does anybody know a consultant that does that? You get flooded with all these different people. If you ask a question, you'll get 48 different responses. And then you have the burden of going through and actually vetting all of these different options. And to your point, in some cases, then you just get pestered with, constant sales calls from providers, maybe even aren't the best fit for it. So you said that, and I thought it was really interesting. And one other thing that I really love that you said that I find, and I am always on some sort of tirade about, that there's always this idea of capacity building within the nonprofit organizations, right? You have to build capacity, you have to build capacity. And I work with a lot of smaller organizations, let's say less than $3 million. And in some cases, their accounting is done by the founder or executive director, or it's one of many hats that somebody's wearing that might be also involved, let's say more operational office manager type roles, right? And I see not just corporate philanthropy, so giving away software that nobody trains them how to use. That happens all the time. But then I also see other funders, not necessarily corporate, but sometimes, but foundation type funders that will say, oh, we're going to offer you to hire a consultant that does the training. And what I keep screaming to people, it's not a training per se issue. You can train these folks all day long, but number one, you're taking time that they don't have to go through this training that they don't want to do for activities that they don't have the bandwidth to do, even if they are better trained. Like actually put money or create a solution that allows them to truly delegate that function of the business. They're not trying to be better trained at bookkeeping. They want to hire a bookkeeper so they don't have to worry about this, because going back to something you said before, oftentimes those leading organizations come through the programmatic side of the business. They don't have the background in the back office stuff, whether it's HR, IT, or financial management or any of those sort of things, right? They're the nurses, the social workers, or the educators, or those folks. And that's really where we want their skills and talents enhancing the program. So it makes me crazy when the idea is, we'll just give them discounted software or give them a little bit of training, or we'll provide all of our organizations, a multi-class, webinar series. Like, these EDs will go because you're funders and they feel obligated to go. You're not going to not go. But the reality is it doesn't actually create any capacity for them. So how can we connect them with providers that actually solve their problem? So anyway, I will digress on that, because if you get me going on it,
No,
it's all the time. can you do a free training for our population? And like, they don't want your training. I'd be happy to do it. I remember when I was the CFO, I had to go to all these obligatory meetings when in reality, we all know, anybody listening, you know that they're mildly helpful sometimes,
Yeah.
the obligation of them. So anyway, I digress.
No, no, I just would say quickly on that point, like, I think there is a lot of dignity in choice. And I bring that up because that's a core
Yeah.
concept on Pond is we also have a like nonprofit perk to the platform that nonprofits literally get
Mm,
paid to use the tool and engage with us in tons of different ways, meaning they build up a balance of hundreds or thousands of dollars that they can turn around and spend on the stuff they're discovering through the platform and do that on an ongoing basis. And
mm,
so
mm,
that is not based on a coupon list that we have to different products. It's you
mm,
spent your time doing something, and so you now have money to spend on other stuff. And I just bring that
mm,
up because I wish everyone is so focused on capacity building, my
mhm.
money going to a specific program that I like, or like all these like
Yeah.
these efforts at controlling when like that none of that is philanthropy. Same with like giving my product away for free. Like that's not philanthropy. Like real trust
Mhm,
philanthropy is give
mm,
people money so they know what they need. Like the right if the right answer is that they need more capacity, they need some like capacity means like someone's taking on a piece of work for them, not that they're
right,
adding something to their plate.
exactly.
So like they need
Yeah,
money to hire someone to do that internally or
right.
externally. And so I just think
Mhm,
that narrative on capacity building, I agree, should totally be shifted to trust philanthropy. And
mm.
then, yeah, let people seek out the resources that they want. But like, have you been to the internet recently? Like there's people can find answers. You know, there's no magic in like your special webinar that you're hosting. Like whatever money you're spending on that, just put it in people's pockets.
I love that. So you have this idea that there are things that for-profits can learn from nonprofits, and I absolutely agree. As I often tell people I run a for-profit business that works exclusively with nonprofits. So I'm towing this line like every day. But I'd be curious to hear from you, Mitch. You've worked in the impact and for-profit sectors, both of them. What could they learn from? What can the for-profit world learn from the nonprofits? We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty never ending list. I feel like I come up with another example just about every day, but I just
Hmm.
think I count myself as it's a massive blessing, not only to be working on a company in this space, because I think there's a massive opportunity and a lot of impact to be had, but I actually think because we listen so much to our nonprofit users, that they are what has really inspired all of the creativity for our business and what we're doing for the
Mm-hmm.
company. So
Mm-hmm.
a couple of things that come to mind, I think community building is something that nonprofits do infinitely better than their for-profit
Mm-hmm.
counterparts. Um, do your customers really feel a sense of belonging with your company? It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty rare. It's a really high bar, and yet that's like the bare
Mm-hmm.
minimum at a nonprofit,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you think of their customers
Mm-hmm.
as donors. So I think there's a lot to be said for shared mission with your audience. I think some companies do better at this than others, but and everyone's trying to be mission oriented. My God, I just started watching that new show with the Elizabeth Holmes kind of docu-series
Mm-hmm.
on Hulu called The Dropout. And there's this really cringy moment where they're asking her in this like rapid fire interview, like one word to describe yourself. And she says, mission, oh, sorry,
That's okay.
mission oriented,
Mm,
which was just like really mission oriented. But I don't think a lot of companies do it super
mm,
well. And so that idea of like building community, like making the impact front and center of like why your customers are engaging with you. Yes, you're solving a
mm-hmm.
business problem for them, that's why they're engaging with you. But I think any ways that you can have shared collective mission with the people in stakeholders in your audience, and turning that into community would be my number one lesson. But I could name a lot if we had more
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I like that. I think too, kind of piggybacking on that with this mission focused. I think one of the things, certainly obviously, my business is very focused on one thing. And one thing that I realized that nonprofits do really well they constantly keep their offerings within a very niche specific area, right? And a lot of businesses, they become conglomerates. They go after this, they go after that. They're chasing the dollars, and people accuse that of the nonprofits all the time. And I will say this from my own experience, right? An organization, they go through a lot of soul searching when they decide to add more programs and serve people that are maybe different than who they're currently serving, or in a different way, right? And I will say that's a lesson that I've learned when starting this business, because I get nonprofits that reach out to us all the time asking me for this or that or this consulting project. And I tell them I'm only working with organizations under this budget size. I only work with organizations in this way. I don't take on any consulting projects. Like, it's a very small box. And the reason for that, much like nonprofits, they want to be really good at the few things that they do. And that's my philosophy too. I don't need to be okay at all of the things related to accounting. For example, I get people asking me probably once a week, working with for-profit businesses. I'm not going to work with for-profit businesses. Oh, you should consider doing this. Or what about startups? They're really great and they need a lot of help. They do, but I'm only working. So that paying attention to mission creep is the buzzword in the nonprofit space, and making sure that for-profit businesses don't have their mission creep. And I've learned you can go much further faster focusing your energy on a very small service offering and getting it really well. If I try to be everything to everybody, we would be much different. We would be much smaller, and I suspect much more stressed out than where we are at right now. So
something I talk a lot about, which I refer to as the pink sherbet theory, which is like, if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're vanilla, and like you're no one's favorite. To keep talking about it in terms of ice cream flavors, right? And it's like, when you're thinking about funders and donors, there is such an unlimited audience of, I know it doesn't feel like that oftentimes when you're on the front, like writing your 100th grant application, or like hunting down your, 1000th major donor to try to get a gift. But the truth is, there is a lot of money out there. And if you're struggling with a wide audience, it's probably because you're too wide. Like, you should have a short list of people that you are you would rather have 15 rabid fans of Pink Sherbet and just be Pink Sherbet, because they're going to help you connect with more people who really resonate with that specific mission. And you won't be working so hard because you're just, by virtue of serving your mission better, you will be, doing a better job fundraising. So I think that is something businesses can learn from nonprofits too, is just like, figure out who you are and be that, and be like the best thing that you can, and stop trying to be vanilla.
It brings me back to a quote that's one of my favorite, that said, if you can't be the best, be different. And that was my thought too. Like, I don't have all of the accounting rules for all industries memorized in my brain, but where we are different, I'm only working with this group of people. I know a lot about this tiny little group of people in the grand scheme of the world. And I'm okay with that. And that's different. And how we approach our work is different. And so it echoes everything what you're saying. And I kind of laugh at the Pink Sherbet because there's this little ice cream shop right around the corner for me. And my favorite is their lemon poppy seed vegan ice cream. And they have this fantastic vanilla, but when I go there, I'm not trying to look at the vanilla. Like, they have all of these fantastic flavors, and there's the lonely vanilla there. So it's a good point. And I love the Pink Sherbet. My Pink Sherbet is this lemon poppy seed, and that's fantastic. I'm going there and excited about that. Even if some people think lemon poppy seed, what the heck, and vegan too.
Doesn't matter. So that's what works for you. That's what's important.
They, and they only have a little, 3-gallon bucket. It's not made for everybody. So, want to round out, what is the most exciting thing that's going on at Pond right now that we can talk about?
Yeah, so literally last Friday, from when we're recording this, so here in early March, we completely redid our platform and launched a new feature called Projects. And so I think this is a big step for us in now nonprofit members on Pond can create a project for just about anything and have multiple going on at once and connect their teams to them. So the idea is that you can get really specific on a certain question or search you have going on, and manage those independently and get to like discrete timeframes, budgets, requirements, integrations, like whatever you want and have all that packaged up really nicely to help make those connections around different need areas as efficient as possible. We launched that on Friday, and we had over 20 projects posted in our first day. So we're really, really excited about that. Also, for the rest of March, anyone who joins Pond that starts a project just automatically gets $200 in their account as we're getting that new feature going. So that's what I'm most excited about. I think there's so much to build on top of that in reaching new types of providers and solving new kinds of problems. And so it's really just the beginning and expanding the capabilities of the platform.
I love that. Yeah, I was on the website today, creeping on those projects, and they're really interesting. And I'm also very curious about the different projects people are asking for. Some don't surprise me, and some kind of do, in an interesting and fun and creative way. And it's really cool to see what organizations are doing to really move the needle on the platforms that they're using, or how they're reaching out to donors, or just what operational challenges they're dealing with. So it's in your background, but for those that can't see your background, I guess the easiest way to find Pond would be going to the website, joinpond.com. Is that right, Mitch?
Yep, joinpond.com. Like I said, it's completely free to join, and we reward our members. You just start building up a balance to use on the platform if and when you're ready. Also, I'm happy to chat with anyone who has questions or wants help navigating or questions about specific projects. I've met with literally over 1,000 different vendors of solutions and products and services.
Wow.
So, I'd love to, my email is just mitch@joinpond.com. So anyone who wants to reach out and catch up, I'd love to. And then we're also, Pond is on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, but I'm also super active on LinkedIn. So encourage folks to connect with me there. Just Mitch Stein Pond. You should be able to find me. I'm pretty loud for a written platform.
Great. We like loud. Okay, Mitch. Well, then that was going to be my next question. If people want to follow your journey, how do they find you? So it sounds like LinkedIn. So we'll put that in the show notes. Mitch, I want to say thank you again for such an interesting conversation. Obviously, I'm biased. I'm much of an operations junkie, as I mentioned before. Join Pond sounds like an amazing solution for people to get connected with those people that could help them, that desperately need help. So thank you again for coming on and sharing your story, talking a little bit more about what Join Pond hopes to solve in this sector. And for those of you that want to learn more about all of the world problems that Mitch is solving, go over to joinpond.com or check him out on LinkedIn. So Mitch, thank you again so much. I appreciate it.